from the 1940s and 1950s, you'll find that when they were interviewing senior executives, and in those days they were only interviewing men for that position, they were not only very interested in whether the man had a wife and children, they actually would arrange part of the interview process to include meeting with the wife also.
Wow.
Because they understood that, particularly in sales, one of the things that should motivate a sales professional is the sense of the infinite. There is no limit on what I can earn. And that's why any company that puts a cap on salespeople's earnings is a very, very misled and ignorant company.
Why is that business is so hard? And how is business similar to a marriage? Well, in this episode, I had invited Rabbi Daniel Lapin back to the show to share with us tips and advice on how to successfully start or grow our businesses. I wanted to hear his thoughts on the spirituality side of business though. And let me tell you, I was blown away from his teachings, and I know you will really enjoy this discussion too. Now, if you're new to my channel and you haven't heard of Rabbi Daniel Lapin before, well, he is a rabbinic scholar, popular international speaker, and the best-selling author of one of my favorite books, which is Business Secrets from the Bible. Well, get your paper and pen ready, and let's join me in welcoming Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Welcome back to the show, Rabbi Daniel. So excited to have you on the show again.
I've been missing you, Lynn. This is overdue.
I know. And look, one of my videos that we had together is going viral. Like, people are just loving the content that you are sharing, and it's also helping my channel. And so I know that people are probably longing for, another conversation from you, because that's like over a year ago. So, one of the important things that people like in my channel is around money and business. And I think we talked a lot about money before, around spirituality, but let's go back into kind of business. And that's that's who I am as a business person as well. And so let's start with, I guess, is business made for everybody? Should someone start a business, or should they just really stick with a job?
Well, the first thing we have to do, Len, is totally erase the distinction between starting a business and having a job, because everybody has to view themselves as being in business. As soon as you think of yourself as an employee, it almost inevitably follows that you start thinking of yourself almost as a victim of circumstance and of having no independent agency of navigating and directing the course of your life. So it's a mistaken way of looking at things. Does that mean that nobody's an employee? Well, look, let's imagine that you are a barista for a large international chain of coffee houses. So you're a barista there, and you work 4 days a week or whatever it is, or 5 days a week, and you get paid so many dollars an hour, and it's very easy to think of yourself as an employee. But that is very destructive. You are actually in business. The name of your business is Lynn Incorporated. Mm-hmm. And you're in the business of being a beverage specialist. Now, right now, you only have one customer who buys your time and skill and services, and that happens to be a nameless international chain of coffee houses. But everything changes when you start seeing yourself as being in business. For instance, in business, you don't go and ask for a raise. You're not a helpless supplicant. Oh, I really need to have more money. Please, can you give me That's not how business people work. You're in business. You know what you do? You raise your prices. Here's another thing we do in business. We make sure that we are not dependent on only one big customer. And so I'm in business. I'm not an employee of the coffee chain. I'm in business. The coffee chain is one of my customers. Therefore, I must create alternative streams of revenue. maybe I'm going to acquire a coffee wagon and do coffee for parties or birthdays or special events or corporate events. I'll find a way of adding a unique touch to it and a special some kind of a special feature. But at that point, great. Now I've now got two streams of income, and maybe because I'm no longer just an employee, I'm thinking differently now. I'm being much more creative. And I start thinking to myself, why don't I do what this international nameless chain does? Why don't I start buying coffee wholesale, repackaging it into my own brand, and selling coffee beans? Why don't I do that? Well, there's a third stream of income. None of these things happen if you think of yourself as an employee. And so my answer to your question is a little bit different from how you phrased it. If I remember correctly, you asked whether everybody should think in terms of becoming an independent business professional, or should some people work in a job? And the answer is nobody should work in a job. Everybody should become. But sometimes the way to start off is to start off with one big customer, and then you go from there. But you're not an employee. You're an independent business professional running your own company.
Yeah, I love that analogy, because then now it helps you to transition easily from an employee mindset. Because sometimes if you don't see it like that, you're just doing the bare minimum. You're not really delivering work. How could you even succeed when you start your business? But if you're already thinking innovatively, then starting a business is a natural next step. I really love that. And so the next question people might ask is like, well, what kind of business should I start? And, and I love that one of the passage that you wrote in your book, the Business Secret from the Bible, you talked about you don't have to invent anything. You can actually combine, mix, etc. So share with us your thoughts on that, because that really helps me, because even right now, just because I have a business, it doesn't mean I stay still. I'm like thinking about how to innovate and try to make my business better.
Here is a very important aspect of this then. I'm going to say something which could be unpopular with some people, and it might even cause some people to say, he's talking rubbish, or it doesn't apply to me. And all I would do is urge everybody to be open-minded to, even if something rubs you the wrong way, and even if something contradicts deeply held values and ideas, it's worthwhile listening to, because being able to cope with cognitive dissonance is one way to be able to grow. If we automatically reject anything with which we don't already agree, your ability to expand your thinking to completely new vistas is fatally handicapped. And so with that warning, let me just say that it actually is very helpful in business if you have children.
Mm.
What's that got to do with anything? And I'll tell you what it has to do. Somebody asked me a question recently. On my website, we do question and answer, and ask the rabbi column. One of the questions I dealt with recently was from a guy who said exactly these words: "I'm being pressured to get a vasectomy. What do you think about that?"
Mm.
I said, well, for a start, I'm not sure how a man gets pressured to engage in an act of self-mutilation. I'm not sure I see that.
Mm-hmm.
And now, why is vasectomy an act of self-mutilation? Well, because men and women are created possessing seeds which can join together to produce a child. That's not going to necessarily happen every time a man and a woman share intimacy. It's not necessarily meant to happen every time. That's not the idea. But the idea is that there is a potential for that. And that makes a great deal of the joy and passion and excitement of intimacy a real thing. And I said that something that many men who have been subjected to that operation have discovered is that they were lied to. because doctors said no effect on sensation because we don't touch any nerves. And that's true, they don't touch any nerves. But what's not true is that a sexual sensation has a lot to do with spiritual, not just physical. And anybody who has had the experience of being with somebody they feel deep love for, and the experience of being with somebody they do not feel deep love for, knows that this is true. The actual physical activity is identical, but the sensation is nothing near the same. And that's simply because there is a spiritual dimension. And part of the spiritual dimension is that a physical intimacy between a man and a woman touches on the infinite. I may not be conceiving a child today or tomorrow or perhaps never, but my body, that part of my body, contains within it the potential for touching the future down to 1,000 generations. As soon as I eliminate that possibility, I have stripped away a powerful spiritual dimension of the act. And not only do I no longer touch the infinite, but I no longer even relate to it in the same way. In a certain sense, I have become a tormented prisoner of the present. This is really important because, and I haven't lost sight of your original question, but sometimes ancient Jewish wisdom can get complicated. And I understand many people will say it's got nothing to do with children. If I have children, that's got nothing, that's separate, that's my private life, that's got nothing to do with business. No, it has an enormous amount to do with business. And as a matter of fact, if you look at old corporate manuals from companies, even IBM from the 1940s and 1950s, you'll find that when they were interviewing senior executives, and in those days, they were only interviewing men for that position, they were not only very interested in whether the man had a wife and children, they actually would arrange part of the interview process to include meeting with the wife also.
Wow.
Because they understood that, particularly in sales, one of the things that should motivate a sales professional is the sense of the infinite. There is no limit on what I can earn. And that's why any company that puts a cap on salespeople's earnings is a very, very misled and ignorant company. It's a terrible mistake because sales professionals work on the potential of infinite gain. Now, I may not earn 20 million this year, but if I sold enough, I would. And I've got to be allowed that, because we human beings do best when we're in contact with the infinite. And children is one way to develop a sense of it. It happens subconsciously, automatically within us. And that's why IBM and other companies liked preferably hiring senior executives who had wives and children, because what they would deliver was different in quality and quantity. And so when you have a sense, when the infinite is part of your being and your outlook, your ability to innovate and to come up with ideas is much greater than if you didn't have that. And so the ability to just let your mind roam and wander, number one, do it after you've spent some time with your children. Take your kids out for ice cream or whatever else you want to do, and then go and lock yourself in a room. Set the clock, the timer for 45 minutes, not coming out till 45 minutes have gone by. And for 45 minutes, you're going to discipline your mind to focus on services that people in your orbit need. Goods that can be derived from combinations of existing products. Some kind of goods or services that you can improve upon. And I would say something else, and this is, again, you'll pardon me, I hope I'm not driving away all your wonderful audience. I don't intend to do that, but I have to say the truth, even if that's unpopular, and that is that the less time you spend watching a screen, the more capable your imagination becomes. And this is because, I don't know if your mother ever told you to stop watching television, read a book.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very common thing, and our mothers were wise to do that, Lynn, because they understood that watching a screen is a passive activity that suppresses creativity, suppresses imagination. By the way, it even lowers testosterone for men. Time spent in front of a screen destroys ambition, drive, and creativity.
Yeah.
So you want to be most creative, put yourself on a video fast. Put yourself on a video boycott for a week. Spend a little time with your children. And if you don't have any children, then conceive one. And if you haven't got time for that, then spend time with relatives, some little kids, even if you have to rent a kid for the afternoon, but spend a little time, because they trigger the subconscious infinite process within us. And so after a week of no screen time, videos, and a little time with kids, and now put yourself in a room for 45 minutes, you'll be able to concentrate. For most of us to say to yourself, think for 45 minutes only on this topic is very hard. Your mind begins to wander. But after you give yourself a little practice and give yourself the prep that I explained, you will come out of that with a whole bunch of ideas, of which maybe most of them are no good. Maybe all of them are no good, so do it again. But you will come up with several ideas. And then you explore those ideas and you talk to people about them. And then you try them out. And so, yes, there is a process by which to enhance your creativity and stimulate the infinite instinct and get rid of screen time, and you'll find that you'll be far more creative.
Wow. This is such an eye-opening discussion. I never thought about the spiritual side, but I did realize that because I had a kid pretty young, at the age of 20, because I had children, I had to be more creative and resourceful, figure out how do I have a kid and do this and do that. And I always tell people it was a blessing, because then I learned how to be resourceful in business. Because when you have, I guess, without children, your life is kind of like a straight row, and it almost like, doesn't challenge you to think outside the box. So what's your thought on the physical side of things, the fact that you do have children, that it challenges you in a different way?
It does. And you see, having a job, God help us, having a job is a very limited, closed-end activity, because deep within you, subconsciously, you say to yourself, I could be fired next month. Or maybe I'll quit next month. But you're not psychically in it for the long haul. You're not dedicated to it. It's like, deciding to run a marathon and then building in exit ramps for yourself so you can quit after 5K or quit after 7K. No, you have to build into yourself the awareness that there's the infinite. I don't stop. I keep going. And that's one of the differences between seeing that I am in business. I'm not an employee.
Awesome. So let's talk about connectivity. I know you mentioned that a lot in your book. So how does connectivity play a role in helping us become successful in business?
It's absolutely foundational. What we have to do is understand what produces money. Or to be more precise, what produces value. Because the actual paper that gets printed by the Royal Mint is just paper. The only thing that gives it value is that you and I and millions of our other friends and associates and relatives have all agreed to assign value to that paper. But if I landed on a remote desert island and I parachuted down, and the locals decide they would like to eat me, and I said to them, tell you what, how would you like it if I gave you $500 not to eat me and instead to go and hunt me some food? And I pull out a credit card or even $500 in cash, and they'd look at each other in complete bewilderment. It has no meaning to them, none whatsoever. It's the same if I would parachute into this remote desert island with a Series 7 BMW car. And I think to myself, well, now they're going to think I'm God. No. The best use they will put that car to is they'll turn it into a place to climb into to avoid the arrows of their enemies. It has no use to them. They have no imagination. They have no concept of a road and of gasoline and of an internal combustion engine and of a car. They know nothing. And so it is that money is like that as well. Money in and of itself is nothing. It only acquires value because human beings create value. And so what I mean by that is, let's imagine, if you will, let's imagine that I go into a shoe store in order to purchase a pair of those snappy shoes with lights that flash when you walk.
Mm-hmm. My kids have those when they're little. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm still looking. All right, don't have it. So I go into the store and I say, hey, do you have any of those nice soft shoes with lights in the heel that flash when you walk in a size 11? And the shoe store owner says, sure, please sit down. And then he actually goes down on his knees in front of me in the way we do in a worship service. So there's a very interesting similarity between customer service and worship service. And he takes off my old shoes and he comes out with a shoe box and he opens it up and he puts on these fantastically comfortable shoes with lights that flash, ties the laces, says, how do you like it? I say, you're a wizard. I love it. It's perfect. I feel as if I'm walking on air. And what's more, I got lights flashing as well. He says, great. I say, how much would that be? Let's say, for example, he says $20. I peel $20 out of my wallet, give him $20, and off I go. Now we have to do a little thought experiment to figure out how has the financial statement of the storekeeper and myself changed because of this little interaction. Let's start off with me. The way to find out what my financial statement is, before the transaction, I had $20. Now I got a pair of shoes. Let's figure out whether the pair of shoes is worth more or less than $20. Well, the easiest way to figure it out is with a little thought experiment. Let's have you come up to me and offer to buy my new pair of shoes from me for $20. What am I going to say?
No.
Why would I do that?
Yeah.
I've been looking for this for weeks. I found it. Oh, why on earth would I put myself back where I was before? Obviously, I value the shoes at more than $20. Otherwise, I would do the exchange again. Well, you up the ante and you say, hey, how about $30? Would you take $30 for your shoes? I think to myself, I don't really want to do it for $30, but she looks so eager about these shoes. Maybe I can nudge her up a little bit. And while I'm thinking to myself, you raise it and you say, all right, how about $35? And at that point, I say to you, you know, I'm not going to sell it to you for $35, but if you want them badly, I'll sell them to you for $40. And the reason I say that is because to make 100% profit on my money in 5 minutes, is just good business. And so I'm happy to do that. And then I'll go and look for another pair of shoes and I'll have $20 additional in my pocket. That's good. We have now established that on my financial statement, my statement said yesterday, $20. Today, shoes equal $40. That's what it is. That's the value. I have, by engaging this transaction, I've increased my net worth by $20. Now, I'm not saying I can immediately convert my shoes into $40. I don't know, maybe you wouldn't go for that. But that doesn't matter. The point is, what is it worth on my books? And now we can go to the storekeeper and take a look at his financial statement. To start with, he had no money, but he had an asset which was worth what to him? Well, it was worth what he paid for it. As to what somebody will pay for it, he's about to discover. But he paid $10 to the shoe wholesaler, to the shoe dealer. He paid $10 for the shoes because he bought 100 pairs of shoes at the same time. So now we look at his financial statement now, and now he has no shoes, but he's got $20. So he went from $10 to $20. I went from $20 to $40. So he literally brought into existence $10 that wasn't in the world yesterday. And I brought into existence $20 that wasn't in the world yesterday. The aggregate economic benefits, the if you like, the gross domestic product of our little system is $30. And that's exactly how it would be listed in a gross domestic product calculation. We have created $30 because of our human economic interaction. So now, if the government printed an extra $30 of currency in order to account for this $30 of value that we brought into existence, the currency would be strong and stable. The trouble is that most governments love spending other people's money. And instead of taxing, you see, if governments raise money only by raising taxes, that can irritate us poor taxpayers. And maybe come election time, we might remember who voted to raise taxes, and we might vote them out of office. And that's no fun. It's much more fun being in office and spending other people's money. And so they don't like raising taxes, so they do it another way. They inflate the currency. They print money for which there no value was created. So in this instance, instead of printing $30, they print $100 and deflate the currency by a factor of 3.
Wow.
So it's really it's really important, I think, to understand how money comes into existence. It comes into existence. Remember, your question was to talk about connections. You probably think to yourself, I wish this guy would learn how to answer a question in 10 seconds or less. It's not going to happen because we're dealing with one of the most complicated aspects of life, namely our relationship to money and other people. And it cannot be simply, this isn't a simple thing of like saying, add more baking powder if you want the cake to be fluffier.
Yeah. This is what I want to talk to you, because you really go into depth and it helps us understand foundational how it really works, Yeah. And so the whole point of this is that you do need people in order to create real value, and that's how business is all created.
You need people who know you, who like you, and who trust you. Those 3 things. Yes. And I like laying this out like this because this way nobody has to believe me just because I say so. Nobody has to take it on faith. I walk you through the process precisely because I want everybody to see for themselves that this is the reality. And so, yes, connections become hugely important. Maintaining those relationships, enhancing them and enriching them, turning acquaintances into friends, turning friends into people who trust you, and turning friends who trust you into business associates. It's very, very important. And what's more, each person has to rid themselves of the inbuilt excuse. I hear this, when I give a speech, and like I spoke in Zurich 2 weeks ago to 6,000 people. I can't tell you how many people came up afterwards to say to me, "Well, I'm just not a people person. I'm just not a people person. So what do I do?" And what's the answer to that? Same thing you do when your skin breaks out in pimples. You spend the equivalent of a small country's gross domestic product on pharmaceutical lotions and creams in order to fix it up. That's all. Nobody walks around saying, "Well, I'm just a pimply person. That's how I am."
Right.
Somebody, a soccer player breaks a leg. From then on, he doesn't walk around saying, "Hey, I used to be a soccer player. Now I'm just a broken leg guy." No, you go to a doctor, you fix it up. So why on earth should anybody think that just because you're not good with people, that's how you have to stay? There are ways that I explain in my books to improve your connection and ability, your connectivity quotient, your ability to connect with people. And put it to work, you will be astounded at how richer life becomes when you've got more friends involved in it. Yeah. And a friend is not somebody who friends you on Facebook. Please believe me, that's not a friend. It was a very clever step of Mark Zuckerberg to call it a friend, but that's not a friend.
Yeah.
A friend is somebody when you land at Sydney International Airport on a delayed flight and you land at 2 a.m. A friend is somebody you can call then and say, "Hey, can I come to your house?"
That's right. That's a real friend there. So you just mentioned, I guess, one of the challenge that someone could go through in business and sabotage themselves from success, which is not willing to change, think that they are that kind of person, but they need to change and add new skills. I guess because one of my last question for this episode is that, why is it that business is so challenging? Like I've been in it for 10 years and I still find that I'm still, learning new things every year. And why is it that so many business fail? Like, there's a high chance, I can't remember the numbers, at 90% or something of failure. So what's kind of your, shorter advice on this question, if you could?
Well, I'll, in true rabbi fashion, I'll answer your question with a question. What percentage of airplanes that are built by the Boeing company and flown by Qantas Airlines, what percentage of those airplanes stay up in the air?
100%. It's never
100%. 100%. That's right. Exactly. It's 100%. Other than if there's some terrible accident, but in terms of the planes themselves, they don't stop working. Other than the Titanic, which was an unfortunate event in 1912. No, 1912. Yeah, it was 1912.
Yeah, I think
so. What percentage of ships that are launched from the Melbourne shipyard float?
I think 100%.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's 100%. Exactly. And what percentage of buildings that are being erected in downtown Sydney will stand?
100%.
100%. What percent of marriages that are entered into this year will last for the next 40 years?
Bad.
Not 100%, right?
No.
Nobody knows the exact answer to that, by the way. It's not as bad as 50%. A lot of people say 50% will fail. I don't think it's true, but I think it's possible that as many as 25 or 30% will fail. That's nothing like buildings, boats, or airplanes, is it?
No.
And how about businesses that are started this year? How many of them will be around in 40 years' time?
Very small number.
Not 100%. What is the number? I don't know. Nobody knows exactly. But I don't know, maybe it'll only be 10% will be around. I don't know. So we have now changed the question you asked me into perhaps an easier to answer question, which answers everything. The question is, why can we build boats, buildings, and airplanes at 100% success, but building businesses and marriages is much lower? And the answer is that buildings and boats and airplanes are totally physical and material objects. Your problems are aluminum and bricks and concrete and steel. Those things are predictable 100%. You know, how is it that jet engines don't stop working often? I mean, you know, sometimes you see cars on the side of the road and you stop to help them and you say, what happened? I don't know, my engine just stopped working. How come jet engines don't just stop working? Because they build them for reliability. And they're completely predictable. Because it's easy to be predictable about steel and concrete and aluminum. But when you're dealing with human beings, there is no such thing as predictability. And the difference between marriages and ships is that marriages involve people, not just material. The difference between businesses and bridges or buildings or airplanes is that businesses are not just material, they involve people. And as soon as you involve human beings, you are now dealing with the spiritual. In the same way as I said, anybody who thinks that sex is purely physical will quickly learn their mistake, because it isn't. It has a spiritual dimension. And anybody who thinks that a marriage is purely physical, well, nobody really thinks that. You'd have to be incredibly dumb to think that. You're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with spiritual factors. And the trouble is, we all go to school and we learn how to handle steel and concrete and aluminum, and it's not even that hard. But very few of us go to school to learn how to handle spiritual factors. An example of that is what we were talking about earlier, the infinite principle. No, we don't teach children that at school. We should, we don't. And so when it comes to marriage, people are not equipped. We're all equipped basically to learn how to build ships and buildings and bridges and airplanes. It's just not that hard. There's just some basic rules you got to know. And they're easy because it's all basically material. But to learn how to build a marriage, you got to know spiritual rules. And they work quite differently. You have to know the infinite principle. You've got to know how men and women operate differently. You've got to know why it is that no man ever came to a woman in history of the world and said, honey, you know, I just feel we don't do enough talking. We really need to sit down and have a good long chat. Right?
It's so true.
No man in the history. Have you ever heard a man say that, Lynn?
No.
You're not going to. Right.
No.
No, you're not going to. That's right. And women assume that if they just knew how, they could convert their husband into a male version of their best girlfriend. Now, I've covered in 30 seconds something that needs hours of teaching and training and learning, but I just wanted to give an example of why marriages are not as reliable as buildings and bridges and boats and airplanes.
Yep.
And businesses are exactly the same.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a business without people. No such thing.
Yeah. Wow.
And whether it's your employees, your associates, your customers, your vendors, and all kinds of other people, those people are all vital for the success of your enterprise. And if you don't know the spiritual factors involved, then you're not going to be able to succeed. People think that as long as human beings are understood to be completely material, all you got to do is pop food in one end and out comes work, like a gasoline engine. No, that's not how it works. It's not how it works at all. There are people who spend a lot of money on clothing that has little labels on it. Why would you spend money on clothing that you then walk around and advertise for the manufacturer? Well, because it's cool to be seen in a pair of jeans with that name on it. And I don't mind paying a bit more for that. But it's not going to last as long as a pair of Levi's. It's not the point. This isn't about utilitarian. This satisfies my spiritual need, not my physical need. And, maybe the employee who's asking for a raise really wants more recognition. Maybe it's not the money. Maybe it's the recognition. You have to know those things.
Yeah.
And why your customer buys your product. Is it vital and necessary for his life? Maybe not. Well, then you have to know why he buys it. But these are all spiritual factors. And people go into business the same way they go into marriage, without clear knowledge of the principles of the spiritual side of reality.
Yeah.
And so obviously many of them fail.
Oh my God, what an amazing discussion. And I'm so glad that you went, your answer was a lot longer because it really needed those. Because I think sometimes when you just expect business to be easy, I don't know, you just don't understand. So you get frustrated. But now that I have it, my takeaway is that, well, business is spiritual. It's complex. It's not simple. So don't expect it to be. And I guess,
and it's wonderful because it forces you to grow. It's great to be forced to grow.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi. I know it's really opened up my eyes, and I know many people are going to be like, wow, after they hear this. So love to hear in the comments below if you have any questions for Rabbi, because I will be inviting Rabbi Daniel back on the show. So thank you again, Rabbi, for your time today.
You are most welcome, Lynn. It's always a pleasure to be with you.